Hey guys, it's me CJ. So sorry that I haven't uploaded in a while. It's been hectic. And yeah, let's get into it. So today's video is going to be about white validation and the model minority myth, and I'm also going to include an example about the Tulsa Race Massacre, just to further prove the point that the model minority myth is a lie and very much untrue. So my thesis for this video is that white validation will never feel as good as embracing one's own culture and community and succeeding by your own standards compared to someone who's white, who's telling you what to do, how to live your life. And so I'm going to be speaking from the perspective of an East Asian woman. That's a disclaimer. I don't hold the perspective or speak for anybody else, especially not other Black or brown communities. I'm just speaking from what I've seen and from what I've learned, from what I've researched. And so, yeah. I first want to start off by talking about the model minority myth. This was first introduced by William Peterson in the 1960s in his New York Times article, Success Story, Japanese American Style. And so this article, it attempts to congratulate Japanese Americans of the time of the 60s in their successful efforts to raise themselves socially by working hard, studying hard, despite all that the government has thrown at them. And so it really just it tries to uplift Japanese Americans, but it does so in a honestly super demeaning way. And not to mention how it also puts down other Black and brown minorities by discouraging them from uprising or responding to oppression with protests or revolts, by just saying, hey, if you do this, if you work hard enough, if you study hard enough, you'll get to our level someday. And so it's just a really harmful article. It basically says, hey, look at how successful these East Asian Americans are. Why can't people who are African American or Latino act the same way and get the same success? Like, why are you protesting? Why are you struggling for equality when you could just be working harder? And so you have to consider like the context of this article. It was in the 60s. Again, there were racial protests, civil rights movements occurring all across the nation, and it's just a really turbulent time for Black and brown communities. And so the stereotypes perpetuated by the model minority myth are that Asian Americans work hard, they study hard, and that's how they achieve success in America. That's how you're supposed to achieve success in America. But historically, not only does it demean other minorities who are not East Asian or, pale-skinned, but also it justifies and upholds this system, this racial hierarchy in America, in which non-white people will always come below people who are white or are richer or have more privilege in America. And so the model minority myth is a lie, if you haven't caught on to that already. But you can observe the events of the Tulsa Race Massacre from May 31st to June 1st, 1921. The facts of this massacre are that there are an unknown amount of casualties. There's an estimate, which is 100 to 300 casualties, but thousands more were displaced or injured during this time. And it was also the people who initiated this massacre, they were never prosecuted by any government level, whether it be federal or state or local. Just nothing was ever done. Nothing was ever really done. Additionally, municipal authorities in the Greenwood district, which was where this took place in Tulsa, initially acted to impede rebuilding. So keep that in mind. There were no reparations, no rebuilding. There was some efforts to help with aid, to help with people who had been displaced. But other than that, like, it was very bare minimum, even below bare minimum. But I also want to draw attention to the names that people have called this event. People have historically said race riot, Tulsa race riot, or, Tulsa massacre. And I want to draw attention to how problematic calling it a riot might be. Because during that time, the term riot actually prevented insurance companies from having to pay benefits to Greenwood citizens whose homes and businesses were actually destroyed during this time in the 2 days that this occurred. And so you have to be careful with how you're phrasing the events of this period and just in general, because calling it a riot actually takes away from how devastating this event was. And so getting into more of like the background of Greenwood and just how this all started, this initially started a little bit before May 31st, when a black man entered into an elevator and stepped on a white woman's foot, causing her to scream out, and this led to an allegation of attempted rape, which actually wasn't true at all, but white mobs formed super quickly and they wanted immediate action compared to like just waiting for the judiciary system to dismiss the charges. And I think the charges were dismissed, but by then it was like too late. So the Greenwood district was also known as Black Wall Street at the time, and it still is. Josie Pickens, who is an author who wrote Ebony, she describes the town as modern, majestic, and sophisticated. It had indoor plumbing, it had a remarkable school system, and it was quote-unquote superior for black children. Greenwood was just designed to be a black community for black people, by black people. O.W. Gurley purchased 40 acres of land, and he sold that land only to black Americans. And it was just designed to be successful, and it was designed to thrive, and it did thrive. There were only 2 airports in the area, and 6 black families actually held their own planes. So, all in all, black people were being successful. People just didn't want to recognize that, and they took it upon themselves to destroy this thriving, successful community that black people had created because of jealousy, because of hatred, because of ignorance. And they basically saw that this community was thriving. They saw that this community was doing so well for themselves, and they had to tear it down. They had to massacre it. And so, historically, looking at the events prior to the Tulsa Race Massacre, black communities have been able to thrive. They have been successful educationally, economically, but people don't want to acknowledge that. They've been able to succeed by the standards of the model minority myth. They've worked hard, they've educated themselves, but people don't want to acknowledge that. They don't want to realize that. And so that's why the model minority myth is just a lie. if it doesn't apply to all minorities, if it doesn't hold true in any, for any, oops, sorry, my bunny is going crazy. But if it doesn't apply to other minorities, then it can't be upheld. It falls apart. And so the Tulsa Race Massacre and destruction of Greenwood's Black Wall Street is just an example of how minority success cannot be judged or labeled by white standards. Ultimately, it is up to the community to uplift itself, to embrace its own culture, and accept and educate each other on, you know, just being accepting. And so, you know, confidence in cultural heritage, that's important, but most importantly, realizing that myths such as the model minority myth just do not hold true, and being able to discern that in modern media especially, that's really important to sort of start dismantling whiteness and just the racial hierarchy that's been upheld by America for so many centuries. And yeah. Thank you so much for watching. That's my little spiel. I hope that was okay. Let me know in the comments if you want to add anything or if you have any thoughts on this. Thank you so much for watching.